This panel, Net Zero Supply Chains, Who's Turning Emissions into a Competitive Advantage? Thank you all very much for joining me. To my left, I have John Thomas, Director of Sustainability Strategy at Decathlon. To his left, we have Mark Roodhuizen de Vries, yes, co-founder and co-CEO of Nexio Projects. To Mark's left, we have Inge Huybrecht, Chief Sustainability and Security Officer at Radisson Hotel Group. Next to Inge, we have Adriaan Thierry, CEO of Bugaboo. And then, last but certainly not least, Tobias Steniger, Head of Corporate Responsibility at Mamu Sports Group. So some huge brands on the panel here. And Adriaan, I wonder if I could start with you. And if you could kind of set the scene a little bit in terms of Bugaboo, in terms of your kind of net zero commitments, your strategy. What are where are you at in it, and what are some of the challenges you're currently facing?
Yeah, so this is the moment where I can promote the brand, right?
This is that moment. Yeah, this is that moment.
So about 4 years ago, we set our target to be net zero in 2035, which we knew was extremely ambitious, but we also knew we had to make a difference. So where we are today, we've reduced our net carbon emissions by 30% per unit, that is. Coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, we'll come to that. We also grow pretty fast as a company. So we look at the per unit reduction, and we've achieved 30% reduction so far. So 10 more years to go to get to the net zero, and that's a challenge.
And so, what are some of the priorities then for you? Is it scope 3? Is it materials, circularity?
Yeah, totally. So the vast majority of our carbon emissions sits in scope 3.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of work on the materials we use, and I could say that the 30% reduction which we have achieved is based on the materials, on the aluminium we use, on the plastics we use, on the textiles, the soft goods we use. So that's where we achieved the 30%. And there's probably another 10 or 20% points which we can achieve through the materials, not as fast as the last 5 years, but there's still some opportunities. And then the next 50% is going to be harder, because then we need to get materials back. And we already do a lot on our designs to make it recyclable, but also reusable. That's another step. But so far, it's been mainly on the materials in scope 3 and working closely with many suppliers as well.
And I imagine maybe I'm incorrect, but I would imagine you share suppliers with other similar companies, your competitors. To what extent, this is the chance where you can say you're better than your competitors on sustainability, or you can say that we've worked together. So which is it?
No, we're highly competitive.
Okay.
We work in an incredibly competitive landscape. There are more stroller brands in the world than you can think of.
Yeah.
So it's highly competitive, and we are very vertically integrated, unlike most of our competitors. But we own our own factory with our own colleagues.
Okay.
So there we can do quite a lot. But on the parts, there are suppliers which we share, but we also like to work with our own suppliers. It's mainly in renewable energy for our suppliers right now, and again in the type of materials. So we use bio-based plastics instead of oil-based plastics, and we use recycled fabrics. We used post-industrial aluminium. And those type of things we're doing with our suppliers. The challenge for our competitors is that they either don't have the knowledge or not the passion or the strategy to go as fast as we go. I think that's the honest answer. And also the amount of money. It's not adding to our profitability, and being a private equity owned company for the last 8 years doesn't make it easier. But we invest millions of our profit in more sustainability.
And you're the CEO, so you call the shots, right? So a lot of this is coming from...
Until the shareholder fires me.
So, but is this coming from... What's the motivation around here? How much of it is driven by your sort of personal value?
No, I
should say, is it the business imperative?
No, I shouldn't take any credit for that. It is really in the DNA of the company. So the brand was founded more than 25 years ago here in Amsterdam, and by the founder and the original designer. It has always been in our DNA. And then probably you'd also attract a type of management which is more passionate about it and who's also working with the shareholder, because you need leadership, you need the shareholder, then you need politics, and you need the consumer to become truly sustainable. But you also need to work with your shareholder. So it's been in the DNA of the company, and it's also part of the brand. So we also like to think that consumers buy us for sustainability. Unfortunately, that's not really the case, but we continue the journey with full energy.
And the last question before I'm going to come to you, John, is that you mentioned that vertical integration as being a differentiator for you compared to is that an advantage when it comes to sustainable, like acting on decarbonizing your business operation?
On decarbonization, it's not the biggest advantage. However, how you deal with your people. So I have my own colleagues in the factory, and I can visit them anytime because I have a badge of the factory, because it's our own factory. I don't have to announce visits or whatsoever. So on how we treat our people, how we pay our people, how we take care of healthcare. Our factory is based in China, so there's an advantage. We know exactly what's going on in the factory. And this factory would not withstand in the Netherlands or in Germany or anyway. There's very high standards. But working with your suppliers, you're very knowledgeable, but that's it. So you still need to work with your suppliers for a lot of the decarbonization.
Yeah, got it. John, we come to you, Decathlon. I love Decathlon, by the way.
Great, me too.
Yeah. So can you say a little bit just on this point about suppliers? I imagine, how many suppliers does Decathlon have?
Yeah, well, like most of the brands on this panel, 99% of our emissions are Scope 3, and we produce in 45 countries, 1,200 suppliers, 1.2 billion products a year. So it's a pretty big scale of operations. And I think for us, within that, we really have to know who are those strategic suppliers that we can rely on for the long term, that share our values, that also see the world the way that we do, not just in terms of sustainability, but in terms of quality, continuous improvement, other ways that they want to be kind of the best in class. And so we tend to work pretty closely with them. We go deep, we help them set targets, we matchmake with them to help find partners to expand on-site renewables, energy efficiency programs, to phase out the use of coal and switch to different technologies. And we also monitor the performance. So at the end of every year, we do an annual kind of supplier review, supplier by supplier, that looks at a whole set of criteria, including sustainability, and basically helps us determine, is this a company we want to do more business with in the future or less? So it's truly integrated into our decision making.
And how much have you had to kind of convince your suppliers that they need to do this, right? Or is it you having to sort of make that argument and convince them, or are they do they get it?
I think it depends where in the world. In a place like China, for example, where there's a lot of government support for things like renewable electricity, it's a lot easier. In a place like Vietnam, where that's less possible, a little more challenging, but we focus on different things with suppliers in different places. But across the board, I think a big thing is actual cost reduction. 20% or more sometimes of the cost of our suppliers can be in energy. So things like energy efficiency are kind of no nonsense, and makes sense for us to do with them, makes sense for them to do, whether or not we're buying from them or not.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What about sustainable materials and processes? How much is that sort of part of the strategy at Decathlon?
Yeah, it's a huge part of what we do. So, product and energy those are kind of two of the big pillars of our decarbonization strategy, as well as new business models. So shifting from linear to circular. And on the product side, I think, preferred materials, I think we're around 40% as a company, and that's across all material types. So synthetic fibers, natural fibers, wood, metal, paper, plastic. It's a huge mobilization of our business. And the way that we've helped, try to scale that up is through our eco-design program. So basically incentivizing our designers and engineers and really trying to unlock their creativity to think about, okay, how do you make this product better holistically? And not just looking at sustainability criteria. So sure, some of the materials might be more expensive, but if you can design it to use less materials, you're not necessarily increasing the price. So we think, having the ability to unlock their creativity is a real asset for us, because many people think of Decathlon as just a retailer, but 80% of what you see in a Decathlon store is designed and developed in-house.
Very interesting. And I noticed last time I was in Decathlon, there was you can buy used used goods, things that people have brought back. It seemed what sort of scale of your business is that element, and will you see that grow? Is the intention for that to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really the third pillar of our climate strategy is around new business models, particularly circular. And when we think about that, we think about repair, so extending the life of a product, secondhand, so selling it back to us and we resell it, or rental, so like short term and longer term. And for us, we actually see that, I know we talk a lot about consumers not wanting sustainability, but actually consumers are really interested in secondhand, in extending the life of their products, particularly if there's emotional attachment to them. So they're actually a huge growth driver of us for the business. Last year, I think our circular businesses grew at 24%, which is much bigger than the business as a whole. So we view it as a kind of strategic growth lever for the company. Right now, it's about 3% of our gross margin value, or gross margin. Yeah, so
very interesting. Tobias, when it comes to you, we've heard a little bit about materials and suppliers, but also on the energy side of things. I know Mammut has been taking some steps to kind of phase out coal from within your business operations. Can you maybe say a little bit about your efforts there?
Exactly. Mammut, we exist since 165 years. We do outdoor sports goods, so similar to Decathlon, based in Switzerland. We have a much smaller supplier base than, for example, like some of the big brands here. So we work a bit more directly with them, even though we don't own them, like Bugaboo. One thing in the fashion industry is still a lot of emissions come from the dyeing and the textile processing, so a lot of heat needed. And this heat is unfortunately still produced with fossil fuel-based materials, energy. So mainly coal and gas. And so we, as a company, but also large parts of the industry, agreed that we're going to phase out coal as fast as possible. It's going super well. So we have strong commitment, but also the reality is that's a big investment for suppliers. So if they change a coal boiler to something else, it's going to cost them a lot. Depends on the size of the factory. And even though it's going well, we also saw a bit the controversy that it produced that a lot of these suppliers then switched to a natural gas boiler, which obviously better, but by no means perfect. But if they invest now to a natural gas boiler, they're going to keep them for the next potentially 20, 25 years, depending on, investment horizons. Which brings us a bit into a conflict, right? So we kind of want to support suppliers that act and we want to support them. But to jump to, for example, electrification or heat pumps is a big leap and it's still not fully proven. So it comes with a downside. But I think to get moving, it's super important and surprisingly well taken by our suppliers at least.
Really, they're willing to engage on that, even though can be cost challenging.
Yeah, usually, yes. I think it also depends on the size of supplier, location, as said. It also depends. We as a mid-sized brand, we sometimes not have the big lever in the factory. So it's dependent who else is in the factory active and can we partner up. I think that's nice. Comes back to the pre-collaborative collaboration that we have in the outdoor industry or luckily. Sometimes we take the lead and some jump on our wagon. Sometimes we are able to jump on someone else's train already running, right? Where we kind of support the statement so that we get a critical share in the factory.
So there's a bit of collaboration within, even amongst your competitors.
Yes, there's quite a lot. I think the fashion industry has been fortunate or unfortunate in the past that there was a lot of push for transparency. So most brands have supplier lists publicly available. There are tools to map suppliers. And we know who else is in the factory present. And we also know what are the ambitions from other brands. And if we find similar level of ambitions, we try to partner up. At the end, it becomes much cheaper for us. It becomes much cheaper for the supplier to not fulfill 5 different requirements. So I think it's a win-win-win at the end.
And so what is the kind of modality for that collaboration? Is there an industry alliance, particular industry alliance that you work through? Who within your business sort of leads that collaboration?
I think it's often driven by multi-stakeholder initiatives. So it can be Cascale. It's like Sustainable Apparel Coalition. That's kind of coalition of a lot of fashion and apparel brands. In the outdoor industry, there's a lot on the European Outdoor Group, which coordinates and facilitates such kind of collaborations. And then usually comes a lot from brands, usually from this sustainability department teams. And then the modality about financing, I think that's where it gets tricky, right? Who finance how much and how you ensure that it's equally fair. These are technicalities then case by case need to be defined. Often the investment happens by the supplier itself, but kind of as mentioned before, right? John mentioned, we kind of try to get support for suppliers to get rid or get over the initial hurdles and obstacles with consultancy, with support, with potentially grants.
And so would you say across the industry that people see it as a competitive advantage? They see decarbonizing their business operations as a business imperative, something that's going to be good for business, will give them a competitive advantage. Everyone's sort of moving at the same. Are there those in the sector that are kind of, holding back?
I mean, there are always...
You don't have to name names. But
No, I won't. I think there are always like other companies, other philosophy, but in generally there's quite a high alignment on that. And it would also in the outdoor industry, because our customers are super sensitive on these topics. And also myself, I'm not always wearing a suit, right?
yeah.
I'm rather up in the mountains, go skiing, and I see the change, and our customers and end consumers are super aware of that and also sensible to the topic. For us, it's more, we call it a business to operate or a license to operate. So I'm not sure if we are bought more often because we are sustainable, but I'm pretty sure we would bought less if we would not be. Kind of the reverse.
Yeah. And so, but it is consumer demand that is driving it.
Yes, I would say.
And do you think the extent to like something, I mean, maybe, don't know if you like this question or controversial, but the fact that Patagonia, right, that you had this sort of like big name at one point, kind of set the standard, I guess, in the industry a little bit. Do you think that get the consumers to kind of want that more out of, expect that out of other brands?
I mean, often I get faced this question, so that's nothing new. Yeah, it is acknowledged in the industry. They, do a good job in a lot of areas. They also do a very good job in storytelling, in how to bring this attention to the people. And of course, we also benefit from that.
Yeah.
At the end, I think there's a lot of other brands out there also doing quite a good job. Maybe with.
I think Patagonia is definitely one that, we would be lying if we didn't say we look to. They're obviously pushing a lot of innovation.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what they do is sometimes challenging to scale at the scale of a company like Decathlon, but it also is pushing us to explore new options, new directions. Like we collaborated with them on a natural rubber product, for example. So, I think there's ways in which we both collaborate and compete with our brands and still sort of figuring out how exactly to do that while recognizing that the direction is clear. And I think, that's sort of the signal that we try to provide to all of our partners is decarbonization is happening and we will support you on that journey.
Yeah. Inga, I want to come to you now. I think, as I'm sure many in the audience can also sort of recognize from their own personal experience, like when you stay in hotels now, you definitely notice a lot more some of the efforts that hotels are making to be net zero and to decarbonize their business operations. But can you tell us a little bit about what your priorities are at Radisson?
Yes. Well, I actually wonder if guests realize the path, the steps that we take on the path to net zero, because people talk to me all the time about the card of the towel reuse and everything else, which is actually a quite ancient practice. So anyway, at Radisson, we're in the business of delivering memorable moments and sustainable stays. So what we want to do is to our 55 million customers that we have annually around the world, we want to provide options for responsible tourism. So we do that by integrating sustainability in the guest value proposition. And of course, by also, we're in a net zero transformation where we took a commitment that this SBTi approved to become net zero by 2050 and to reduce our footprints by 46% by 2030. We are 33% of reduction that we have realized that's on intensity. So, okay, we're not yet fully there yet. But on integrating it in the value proposition, because I think that is the key point, we want all our hotels to offer sustainable stays, which is actually done by complying with 12 criteria that are externally verified and that can be put up there as a verified label. But recently, what we have done, and it's a bit under the motto of the world is changed by your actions, not by your opinions. That's a quote by Paulo Coelho, by the way. We are always in the business of pioneering. We're always in the business of trying to see how far we can go and if we can actually realize some things. So this year we launched 2 verified net zero hotels, one in Oslo and one in Manchester. And why is this a novelty in the industry? It's because we focus not only on taking away scope 1 and 2 emissions, but finally we also managed to measure scope 3 and to significantly reduce scope 3 emissions in those 2 hotels, because a lot of our scope 3 normally is spend-based estimation. So we went into real data collection, specifically on topics like food and beverage, for example. And then according to a certain methodology that is called the Net Zero Hotel methodology for hotels. And we got that verified by TUV Rhineland. I'm sure they're in the room here. So all that process is actually new. And the fact that we included scope 3 and we significantly reduced scope 3 is actually done for the first time.
What about in terms of, I know you in terms of, you sort of alluded to guest expectations a little bit, and the sort of real business case for net zero. I mean, what's your experience? Are travelers and corporate clients, are they actually rewarding that effort?
Actually, they do. Now, what we see, as you have in many industries, there's actually a big say-do gap, right? So when Booking.com or others measure every year what are the sustainable travel intentions, about 84% sometimes of people say, oh, yes, sustainability is important and we want to book a sustainable hotel. But nobody does until now. Because a lot of the people actually say that it's hard for them to judge. Sustainability isn't obvious and it's not easy. You see a lot of labels. So I think we believe it's important to work with verified or certified programs, hence why we verified the net zero hotels. And we put it in the name, so you can't escape it. It's verified net zero hotel in the name, and it's verified net zero room type, so standard room is a net zero standard room, etc. So you can't escape it, but it's in full transparency. So we communicate to the guests, they can really dig to the details of the data if they want to. It's in full transparency, which was necessary for the verification. But coming to your question, we have tremendously positive results. So we launched these 2 hotels during the summer, and we now are at a point where the results are amazing. 90% of the visitors in the hotel say they are aware it's a net zero hotel. 25% of the people post-stay say that they booked because it is a verified net zero hotel. The relative market share of the hotels, one hotel is now 40% better than its competitors in market share. We have been able to prove that we added about 3% in the revenue per available room of these hotels. The guest satisfaction is up. So we even in one of the 2 hotels, but we're collecting more data, we did a lot on decarbonizing food and beverage, working with menu engineering. We reduced the carbon footprint of the menus up to 40% now and 60% in the other hotel. So we even in one of the 2 hotels reduced the food costs of M&E menus. So we're measuring all these impacts, and it's actually this impact that hopefully will turn this into a cross-brand program with many more hotels to come.
Yeah, excellent. Mark, I'm going to come to you. I'm conscious I've let time get away from us a little bit here. But Mark, you're Nexio, coming from a slightly different angle, right? Because you do kind of more consulting with companies. And obviously we've heard here from some very big brands, right? But at the same time, there's also small and medium enterprises and businesses that also face the kind of decarbonization imperative and may see it as a competitive advantage. So what is the role for decarbonization for small and medium enterprises?
So thanks for the question. I think that's super important. We have these beautiful brands next to me, but I think the SME voice is even more important because we can have this big wish, this big dream to decarbonize, but if the SMEs are not moving with us, well, trust me, we're going to have a blocker, we're going to have a bottleneck. Then we can have great stories with great logos and great frameworks, but if we're not moving it forward, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
SMEs are experiencing so much pain at the moment. And I think we're now reaching a level where we can actually get it to another level. And I think also what Decathlon is doing is amazing to get the suppliers moving. But we need to get these suppliers to understand what it means to decarbonize. And I think also to allude to your point with decarbonization, I think this word is being used a lot of times here today. In order to really move towards being more resilient in also your decarbonization, we need to look above and beyond decarbonization. It's just one thing. No, we need to look beyond carbon. I think carbon is a great thing, but we need to look beyond of that. And I think,
To what?
I mean, carbon is just the beginning, right? So I think if you also look to labor and human rights, there are many other topics that you need to discuss with your suppliers. And I think carbon is definitely one thing, but you need to scale it up to something bigger with your suppliers. Otherwise, one of the pains of the suppliers that they're getting so many voices from so many departments, from so many different industries and companies that they're getting confused on how to actually tackle this.
Yeah. And what differentiates those companies that are kind of truly making decarbonization a source of resilience?
So I think it's leadership. And I think there's been a lot of change. I think we're in this polycrisis, political and also with climate. And I think from my side, this differentiation really lies upon the leadership that a lot of CEOs have changed, but also the leadership in applying to SBTi, applying, getting to LCAs and PCFs, going towards your policies, and also really setting up a strategy that really combines your DNA and decarbonization. And I think that's really important to how people can actually differentiate themselves, because at the moment, the suppliers really just do whatever they're being told. And how can we move away from being told something to actually have this collaborative component?
Yeah.
So there's this duality between profit that we need to do on the short term very fast. There's a lot of change at the moment, of course, reorganizations, but also the collaboration perspective. Again, one of these buzzwords, everybody says we collaborate with their suppliers, but is that actually true?
Yeah.
Or are we just implying things to our suppliers? Because yes, I'm investing a little bit of money, but as a big firm, I think you can definitely do more. And there's, I think, a role to play for big firms to start collaborating in bigger pools and start collaborating with your industry peers.
Yeah. Excellent. Great way to end the panel. And apologies to the audience for not being able to come to you, although I didn't see any questions on the Slido. But I would say thank you very much to our panel for sharing your experiences and what you're working on. And it is clear that obviously you all do see it as a competitive advantage. And so thank you all very much. If I could have a round of applause for my audience, for my panel.